Hey, Superachievers! This episode is part of a very special series I have curated for you. Your level of emotional intelligence is one of the most significant contributors to your success in life, however you choose to define success for you. In my emotional intelligence workshops, I use the EQI 2.0 model to help professionals and leaders assess how they are doing in self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal relationships, decision-making, and stress management, the main areas of the model. The model contains 15 competencies grouped into each of the areas I just mentioned. You can learn more about the model at mhs.com. So what is so special about this series? Each episode is a deep dive into a competency from the model with an expert who provides you with strategies for improving your emotional intelligence. In this episode, Whitten Rutledge talks about flexibility as it relates to emotional intelligence and how to be more flexible when life takes those inevitable turns. Whitten is the Special Projects Coordinator for OKA. He manages workshops, coaching events, website design and upkeep, technical support, and creates blog content. Welcome, Whitten. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Well, hopefully guests have seen that first topic of independence that you spoke on. If not, I highly recommend you go back and listen to it. But today we're talking about flexibility. So before we get into that, can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Sure. So hi, my name is Whitten Rutledge. I'm an employee at OKA, Auto Cargo Associates. EQ is a lot of what we do. Emotional intelligence is kind of our bread and butter. My father, this is part of his life's work. And so as a teenager, I was always around. I was getting certified at a young age. My brother was young and he got certified in all these tools. So emotional intelligence as a language is something that I've spoken in my household for about as long as I can remember. So that's my background in EQ.
There you go. Well, and what an awesome background it is, because emotional intelligence helps determine our success in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about, so we're on the subscale of flexibility today. What is that in relation to emotional intelligence?
So flexibility from an EQ lens specifically is about the ability to adapt your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors to unfamiliar, unpredictable, and dynamic circumstances.
Yeah, so a little personal agility, right? Kind of surfing the waves as they come.
That's quite literally.
Yeah.
Literally and emotionally speaking.
Emotionally, yeah. So let's first talk about that individual that maybe does not have enough flexibility in their emotional intelligence. What could we tell by their behaviors or just that they're low?
So low flexibility involves rigidity in your thinking. That there is one way to do things. It's the way we've always done things, and that's it. There's no more. It can look like resistance to change, that if it's different, I don't like it, I don't want to be a part of it. And it also can look like lacking curiosity, that this is the way, and I'm not even interested in knowing if there are better ways because I already know this, and so I don't want to try a different one.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I know some people like that.
Don't we all?
Don't we all, right? So if we are perhaps suffering, or dare I call it suffering, if we are low in flexibility, what are some ways that we can improve it?
The easiest way, I like to separate my actionable steps into like a short term, like I can do this today, and then a longer term, something I practice over the course of several months.
Yeah.
And I also like to think about them in a professional setting and in a personal setting. And so a quick fix that I think is easy to practice your flexibility is to ask questions that will provoke new data. Especially if a group you're in is struggling or you just can't quite come up with a new answer. You don't have to ask someone a question that will give the answer, but to just start taking steps back and looking at, all right, what are we trying to do here? And to ask questions that will provoke new data that maybe hasn't been brought to the table yet. like what other actions can we take, or what would happen if we took a different approach. So
Nice.
those are some quicker, easy questions that you can ask. In terms of other things in a more personal lens, I drive a different way to or from work, and look at the things that you drive by, look at the things you pass by. You can have lunch at a restaurant you've never been to before. Or you could even invite a colleague or a friend that you haven't had lunch with before, just to like kind of shake your routine up and see how you can continuously do things differently. Because even if you're happy, you might not realize that there's something even better out there.
Yeah. I'm smiling because a couple of thoughts went through my head. First was, or even order something different at a restaurant you normally go to.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
How many of us order the same thing every time?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that I'm quite the fast food fanatic. And so there are plenty of times where I'll just be sitting there staring at the menu and realize, oh man, I've had, the chicken sandwich 8 times, already, or whatever. I should try something else. I should try, even if it looks gross, something completely, different on the menu. That sometimes it can be nice to just shake up the routine a little bit.
Yeah. And at least find out that you don't really like something. Right?
Yeah. There's that famous Edison quote about finding, 1,000 or however many ways that to not invent a light bulb. That it's nice to at least cross things off the list.
Yeah.
And when you're searching for an answer, when you're struggling with a project or whatever, getting answers of, all right, well, it's definitely not this, can at least help. It's really people with high flexibility are quite good at finding solutions that you'd never even considered before.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm also hearing maybe say yes more when your first tendency is to say no.
Absolutely. It's a big like improv thing, like a yes and that like just it's people really get some exciting things done when they can do that.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember my daughter for her 21st birthday, she's like, let's go do an escape room. I'm like, what is that? That sounds silly. And so I okay, let's do it. And now it's been almost 550 escape rooms later.
500. Oh, that's so many. That's awesome.
I found that I love them. But so it's only because I said yes that one time, even though I thought it sounded stupid. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. Where do you do them? Where do you do all these different escape rooms?
20 different countries and so far 23 different states.
Goodness gracious.
I know. So it's been fun. That's the third book, Life is an Escape Room, just all the different things you can learn about in an escape room. And one of them is emotional intelligence, by the way.
I love that. I need to do some more.
There you go.
My
Definitely.
one is looking pretty paltry in comparison. I need to step it up and start escaping more.
There you go.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned there are some, maybe some long-term type strategies. What are some of those?
So this one is a little bit too aggressive for some people, but if you have a trusted friend or colleague, you can tell them, that I'm trying to engage my flexibility. This is something I'm working on, and ask that person to push you with challenges or with new perspectives. So to someone that you believe is up to the task, to have them constantly ask you new questions and try and poke holes in what you're doing, to force you out of your comfort zone, to force you to try something new, to force you to realize that sometimes you don't have the answer you think you did. It's not for the faint of heart, because obviously I'm not encouraging anyone to, lose friends or to introduce conflict into their relationships all the time. But that some people will surprise you at how good they are at poking holes in things and making you think on your feet.
Nice. As you were talking about that also brought up for me, there's a coaching technique called challenging, and it's challenging the person with something that would be outrageous to them. And then when they meet you like halfway, it's already outside their comfort zone. Like one person who has trouble taking time for themselves, say, you know what, I challenge you to take 2 hours every day for yourself. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, no. And then you'd be like,
2 hours.
Okay, could you do 15 minutes then? Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's funny. That reminds me of that. I think that'd be a good technique too for the friend.
And my guess is that that 15 minutes eventually, it's like jumping into a pool. It's like, okay, I'm dipping my feet in and now it's better. And
another 5
all
minutes.
right, well, let's turn that 15 minutes into 30 minutes. And then, okay, now we're up to shin deep in the water. And that eventually, maybe you don't build up to the 2 hours necessarily, but that it's EQ is like a muscle that we are all born with it. Some people are born naturally with it and some people are not. But everyone can do exercises to flex and improve this muscle and get better at it. It's something that you can do all the time. And so the long-term solutions with any EQ element, but with flexibility, is to be willing to dedicate yourself a little bit and challenge yourself and push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So with flexibility, that just involves any time that you hear something that stresses you out or it's something new, take a deep breath and think about, all right, let's at least try it before I say no.
There you go. I love it. Now let's look at then those individuals like myself that tend to overuse flexibility where it becomes a weakness. First of all, how does that come across when you are overly flexible when it comes to emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So too much flexibility can look like someone who is more prone to starts than to finishes. That ideas are like, oh, that's exciting. Like, I want to try that.
Shiny thing syndrome.
Precisely. That the idea of something is so exciting, and so I want to try it. And then I realize, like, maybe I don't like this, maybe whatever. They have trouble sticking to personal commitments sometimes. I would imagine that's a problem with other people in your show, that people sign up for a time and then a day before have to cancel because something came up and whatever. And so the kind of friends who always say like, oh, I'll absolutely come to your dinner party or I'll be there. And then 15 minutes before, hey, something came up. Sorry,
I don't feel like it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, at least if they said that, they would be honest about it. But you can always tell because it's always the same excuses. Oh, my parents said no, or oh, my wife said no. I can't. That it's always the same group of people who are struggling to commit to things. And it can also be someone who's just bored with a routine and with predictability. That they, like we said, part of practicing flexibility is trying new things and shaking up your routine. There's some people who are incapable of creating a routine because to have it be the same is just the end of it. Exactly. Yeah. And so people who are too high flexibility can be a little absent-minded, professor-ish, can be just not sticking with some of the things that they thought sounded like a good idea.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing, and I already know a strategy one for this one. So
please share it.
Pair yourself with someone who's quite different in flexibility, like myself, like almost too flexible. My husband, a little lower on the flexibility scale. So like if it were up to me, we'd be moving to a new place like every 2-3 years because I get bored with the one that we're living in. And he's like, no. So we compromise. We move like every 8 to 10 years instead of every 2 to 3 years. So have an accountability partner like that. But what are some other things you recommend?
Yeah. So I said it in the other episode. Go listen if you haven't already. But that when you have too much of an EQ composite, the best advice is to balance it out with other EQ elements. And so for me, I think the best ones for flexibility are self-actualization and problem solving. That to dive into self-actualization means to think about who are you and what are the ways that you show up in other people's lives, how are you perceived and what behaviors are you actually representing in your physical world, in your space. And spend some time thinking about that. And if you don't like what you see, if you do see, maybe I am too flexible, maybe I am always going with the flow or always saying yes to ideas and then I don't stick with them, or I don't like doing the same things all the time, to take some time to yourself and realize like, oh, this is what I'm doing, that I'm not sticking to things. I'm not sticking to plans. That can help. And with problem solving, to kind of sit down and sometimes too much flexibility can result from having difficulty. I arrive at a crossroads, and now because I have to make a solid decision and follow through with it, that can be scary. And so problems can end up just piling up that you throw them in the closet, close the door, and hope that they don't bother you later. And so taking some time to really sifting through and practicing, nose to the grindstone, even if it sucks, finishing through and holding yourself accountable. And having a partner to help do that really helps.
Yes,
To surround yourself with a support system of people who will hold you accountable is very helpful.
Yeah, nice. Well, it's funny too, as you're talking about that. One of the things that I've set in for myself, because I'm high on self-actualization as well. One of the things I set is I set a goal for myself and the reward. So if I'm having trouble sticking with something, the goal is to make it through, and then I get to reward myself with something like maybe doing something new or doing a weekend of escape rooms or something like that, so I can stick with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel, everyone is familiar with that at some point. It's a great idea, that it's like, I have to do X, but I want to do Y. And so, all right, I'll reward myself with things I want to do after I get through some of the things I have to do. That's a process that basically everyone has to go through at some point. But I find that, using the language of EQ can really make that click and make it, make more sense.
Yeah,
to
make
someone.
it intentional. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what is your final piece of advice in regards to flexibility?
All right, so 2 pieces of advice. I said it last episode. Go listen. But one is a line from BoJack Horseman show on Netflix, where he's decided that he wants to undergo some personal change in his life, and he starts going on runs, although it's not really about the cardio exercise. But during one of these runs, he passes out, and someone who has been watching him and also goes on runs kind of stoops over him and says, "It gets easier as you do it, but you have to do it every day, and that's the hard part." And that applies to all EQ composites. That applies to flexibility, that if it's something you're not good at, or if it's something that you do too much, balancing yourself is hard, and you have to do it every day, but it does get easier. The second is to just stay in touch with the way that you are arriving at other people's lives, because you don't want to shut ideas down before they pop up. You don't want to stay in a box and never leave that box. That low flexibility is not a good thing. But being a little wishy-washy and being too loosey-goosey also aren't a good thing. And so to keep track of how you appear in other people's lives is my second piece of advice for flexibility.
I love it. It's almost like the Goldilocks principle, right? There's too much and there's too little, and just let's go for just right.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more about Whitten, visit his website at oka-online.com.